What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Kick-Ass Podcast. I hope you're having a fantastic week as always. Today we are here to talk about solely AEW and, of course, Dynamite from last night. I shouldn't say solely because you guys know me by now. I probably will go off on a tangent, side route here or there. So forgive me if I do, but the main focus is just AEW. We have a lot of news coming out of Dynamite from last night, the main event. We have updates on Hangman Page, so we'll definitely be getting into that, and it all seems to be positive, so kind of get that cleared away and get that that speculation out of the way. He himself sent out a tweet earlier today and was apparently eating a panini for lunch also, so it seems to be a good sign. So like I said, we'll be getting into that in a little bit here, but first things first, we have a couple things that we're going to talk on outside of the ring with AEW, some contracts that have been renewed and extended for a few years, which is definitely a good sign for some key players at AEW. Was crucial, I think, in my opinion, to keep maybe one more so than the other in some routes. But we'll definitely be getting into that and starting off with that in a second. But as always, guys, I appreciate you for downloading and listening to the show. I know it's been a little spotty here lately, but I'm getting try to get a little bit better with my schedule and just some things that have been going on outside of the podcast world. But as always, I just appreciate you guys for listening to the show and keeping me in your feed, whether it's on Apple, Spotify, anywhere really. It's like I mentioned, I'm sure a few episodes ago. It's crazy to see. Like I love numbers and shit like that. So it's cool to see, even if it's just like one person out there in like Australia or Canada or Mexico or whatever. It's just really cool to see just the reach and technology nowadays. It never ceases to amaze me. So it's really cool. So I appreciate you guys, and it's just a cool thing to see. But with all that said, we're going to get it right to the show. I guess I should say, get the Twitter out of the way. You can follow me on Twitter at ASHMANNS, and the show, more importantly, at Kickash Podcast _ But the most important contract extension and renewal, I guess you can consider it as, is for the AEW World Champion being Jon Moxley, of course. It is I think the original news dropped a few weeks ago, but with the recent news of another contract that was extended, and like I said, I didn't touch on it in the past, I would be remiss if I just avoided mentioning the great Jon Moxley has extended his contract with AEW for 5 years, which will carry him into 2027, which is still just a weird number to say and think of out loud. But Sports Illustrated recently was the one who, or recently rather, was the ones who dropped the initial reporting on the deal being extended with Moxley. And he himself had some words, a brief interview with Sports Illustrated, which was pretty cool because obviously you guys know Mox isn't the type to go out there and really do many interviews, especially now that he's in a company, so it's really cool to see him do. But he said, quote, "I don't plan on going anywhere else. It's the best job in the world, and I'm very lucky to have it. In AEW, all I worry about is wrestling. That's my focus, and that's a joy. I love storytelling. I love promos. I love wrestling. I love coming up with ideas for other people. I love learning. For me, it's a perfect fit." End quote. And that, I mean, yeah, that's just Jon Moxley. And I think especially if you read his, the book that he wrote, Mox, I think it was maybe a year ago now, or if not a year, approaching a year, is when it was released. But man, it's so good. I think I actually want to go back and reread it. I had a audio. I was gonna say I think I downloaded the audiobook he did as well because he actually narrated himself, but I don't think I actually ever went back and downloaded it. Again, guys, little tangents, but I definitely recommend it. I know I listened. I think it's like a 4 or 5 minute preview that they give you. So it's just really cool to hear him tell his story. So if I haven't, I'm definitely going to go back and download it now that it's fresh on my mind again. But to continue on with his kind of the interview that he did with Sports Illustrated and kind of his mindset and where he's at with this new extension with AEW, he mentioned that, and side note, it's crazy they referenced that he's been in the industry for almost 20 years now, which is just, it's crazy to think about. But he kind of referenced just the gap in between his career and just kind of where he's at in his life. He said, quote, I'm a good gap between the old generation and the new generation. I come from a less Thatcher system, so I understand paying your dues and respecting veterans. I'm also old enough to know what it was like to go to the post office and send stacks of videotapes, ones I had to make to promoters. Crazy. I was also there for the advent of YouTube, and I was one of the first indie wrestlers to gain a buzz doing that. My friend had a video camera and a laptop, so I would cut promos every week on my indie shows and used YouTube to my advantage. When I started in 2004, there was WWE and some other indies, but there wasn't much money in them. There was a big gap in between when you first started and actually having any success in the business. Now there are so many tools and so many promotions and such a great fan base, and wrestling has evolved so much. It's a great thing for the fans and the wrestlers. No one is shoving a script in your face telling you what you have to say. I wish I had this opportunity in AEW when I was 25. I hope the young people at AEW understand how cool this place is. End quote. I mean, that kind of just speaks for itself. I love the, kind of just brief synopsis that he gave there, and just the beginning, middle, and the end for him. And it does make you wonder too if we had Mox, like maybe the version of Mox that we got when he was first debuting in the Shield, for instance, with WWE, or maybe even 2016 Mox, or maybe 2015, 2016 Dean Ambrose, if we had that guy in AEW, if AEW was around, it's just very interesting to think about the projection and the maybe change, the drastic change in Jon Moxley and Dean Ambrose, and what the wrestling world would look like. You know what I mean? Of course, there's so many different variables, and that's a completely different podcast of what the world would have been like, and if AEW was around in 2015, 2016. But it's just really interesting to think about. But I don't. To me, I really enjoy this version of Mox. So when he mentioned, he wishes he had this opportunity when he was 25, yeah, I'm sure he does, because I'm getting old too. So it's you think about, damn, if I was where I'm at in my life now, 5 years ago, when I was 5 years younger, man, it's one of those things, what you would tell your younger self, to do better or do differently. And just presenting your younger self with different opportunities, but that's part of the fun in the journey too. So I get where he's coming from, but I for whatever reason I just really enjoyed that little brief synopsis that he gave. I really enjoyed this interview, so I definitely recommend you guys checking out the full thing with Sports Illustrated. But he did go on and he had another excerpt we have another excerpt from the article itself, and I should reference as well. I'm getting, of course. The article that I'm reading here was compiled by WrestlePurist.com, so shout out to them. He did reference the time that he was supposed to be taking off, and of course that drastically changed after All Out. He said, quote, "I was going to be gone and off TV for 6 weeks. It wasn't that I needed a vacation. I was feeling good and feeling hot, but it had to do with what we were going to do for a story. Going into All Out, I was thinking, after I get through this match, that's it for a while. I wrestled the match and we kicked each other's ass. I was happy. Chicago was happy. Everyone was happy. I went outside to smoke a cigarette with Eddie Kingston in celebration. That vacation lasted about 30 minutes. By the time I went to bed that night, I was pretty sure we were going to pretend that vacation was never going to happen. But it's all good. You just roll with the punches." End quote. Love it. Fucking love it. I imagine just walking out the building, going to your car, right? And you just see Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston outside in the back smoking a cigarette under that random spotlight that's out. There's always that one light, that's just randomly and obnoxiously bright outside for no reason. And you just see Mox and Kingston just smoking a cigarette. It'd be fucking great, man. Just fucking great. He did go on to address where he was at mentally last year as well. He says, quote, "A year ago, I wasn't in the same headspace. I was all fucked up. I hated traveling. I was living in Vegas. Felt like I was always in an airport, flying coast to coast, and I was sick of leaving my family. I thought about freelancing when my deal was up. Not that I would leave AEW, but I didn't want to be there every week. I was in a bad place. Then I went to rehab and all that, and now I'm in a totally different headspace. We're living in Cincinnati, too, which is great. I look forward to going to TV every week. I get to see my friends in the Blackpool Combat Club. I'm not fucked up. I have a clean headspace. My life is completely different than it was a year ago, and all for the better." And, again, speaks for itself. And it's just a nice reminder, too, to, never give up on yourself. And, it's just, I don't know, man. It's just cool to see how drastic his just personal life is for him, and to see him reference it and to see him be cool with talking about it, even though he's like not going into specifics, but what he says here is perfect, and it's like more than we even needed or deserved, and it's just really cool. It makes you happy too, and it's just a nice reminder too, like shit, so much shit can change in a year, 6 months, a month, you know what I mean? So it's just cool to see. But to wrap it up, he goes on to talk about him kind of limiting his outside of AEW partnerships and dates, including New Japan. So not that he'll be solely working for AEW, but he's definitely cutting back on the independent scene route, which is pretty big because he's still I think he actually just recently dropped the GCW championship to Nick Gage. I think that just happened maybe, I don't know, recently, but so I guess that's not that big of a deal, but it's still still rather newsworthy, I would say, or maybe not newsworthy, but a notable tidbit, I would say, because that was a thing that he really enjoyed doing, and he really liked the freedom. But he says, quote, "If there's something that I want to be a part of, I'll find a way to make it happen. That's tougher now. I have my family, AEW, and New Japan, but I love supporting independent wrestling, so you never know when or where I might show up." And yeah, it makes sense. Like I said, he obviously had, well, like he said, he has a family, and it makes sense. But I'm glad that he still referenced New Japan specifically. But it'll be interesting to see how much he does cut back, because it was cool to see, like, oh my god, like Moxley just showed up here or whatever. But at this point too, I don't know exactly how old he is, or I think, yeah, he's actually 36. So I mean, God, that's not old. I hope it's not old. But yeah, dude has a family now. Like, he has a daughter, a wife, he has a family. He wants to just relax sometimes, or the majority of the time too. Like, I don't blame him, So you're never going to hear me bitch or complain that someone wants more time off to be with their family. That's kind of asinine if you think about it. But the last thing that I will touch on, and then we'll wrap up the Moxley portion and move on. And like I said, you can check it out on Sports Illustrated if you want to read the whole thing. But he mentioned kind of the sobriety, and to me that's kind of a really important piece too. And it's really cool to hear what he has to say. So he said, quote, "It's not like you get sober and instantly feel great. This takes time. It felt kind of whacked out, or I felt rather," he said, "I felt whacked out, sorry guys, when I first came back. My first couple of matches felt like out-of-body experiences. Being in the ring with Brian again at the beginning of the BCC, that's when it all started to click again, and it became fun again. Everything, and I mean everything, became fun again. A few months later, somewhere along the line, after the Anarchy in the arena match at Double or Nothing, I realized I was having a fucking great year. Even though I'm working my ass off, I'm not trying too hard. I'm letting the match come to me. I'm letting the promo come to me. It's fun as shit, and I have so many fucking great people to wrestle. It's so much fun. Regal is in my ear every match. I know exactly what I want to do, even if it's just perfecting my Europeans in a match. That pumps me up. I practiced this kick for a month, and I nailed Juice Robinson with it 2 weeks ago on Dynamite. I felt so fucking good about that. My goal is to keep getting way better. I want to wrestle into my 50s and become one of those old, crusty wrestlers. It's going to be fucking awesome." And yeah, that's fucking Jon Moxley, just fucking great. Like, he's awesome, dude. Like, even if you don't, I don't know how you can not like Mox. If you don't, like, please hit me up on Twitter. I'd love to know, like, why you don't, like, your take. I'm just really curious. I'd just love to hear other people's opinions and to see why they dislike someone. But yeah, that's, long story short, guys, Jon Moxley is here to stay with AEW for at least another 5 years into 2027. But it was a fun article and a fun kind of dive into the mind of Jon Moxley that we don't really get that much. So definitely wanted to bring that up and reference that with you guys. But that takes us to our more recent contract extension. Next up, we have the Ring of Jericho heavyweight champion Chris Jericho signing an extension with All Elite Wrestling as well for another 3 years until the year of 2025, December 2025 specifically. I believe Variety was the first to break the news, so shout out to them. They referenced him being the Wizard, which is it just tickled me. But regarding the news, AEW President Tony Khan hailed Jericho as one of the all-time greats. If you guys don't know, Jericho was always one of Tony Khan's all-time favorites. He's mentioned that a few times. And Jericho is. I'm not discrediting it at all. Jericho definitely is, especially now. Or especially with this most recent run, rather. He definitely has solidified himself as an all-time great. If you didn't view him as such before. So, And man, like I mentioned before, but it would really be interesting to do a deep dive on his whole career, like just to think of all the different companies, characters, just all the shit Jericho has been through, and just all the variations of himself. Be really interesting to see. So definitely may table that for later. But Variety did go on to note that Jericho, kind of in a similar vein to AEW World Champion Jon Moxley, which they did a reference, I don't believe, in Sports Illustrated, but Jon Moxley, of course, like we just discussed, agreed to a contract extension, but they both will take on increased responsibilities behind the scenes, and and Jericho specifically will serve as a producer and creative advisor, in addition to continuing as a mentor to young talent. And then Tony Khan went on to kind of express his excitement. He said, quote, Jericho, or Chris Jericho, long ago cemented his legacy as one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time, and we're fortunate to have his skills, charisma, knowledge, and insights in AEW for years to come. Jericho has discovered a fountain of youth in his career, he has discovered a fountain of youth this year, and he's having some of the very best matches of his legendary career against some of the top names in wrestling. In expanding his responsibilities, he'll continue to serve as a valuable leader with our roster, having the opportunity to utilize one of the most creative minds in the history of wrestling. And I mean, fucking right. Like, I mean, say no more about that. But Jericho obviously had a little bit to say regarding the extension as well. He said, quote, I guess the simple answer is why not? Things have been going so well in the company, and I really do feel that this is my company. It's tattooed on my heart, so to speak. I've been here since day one, and there's really no reason not to be here continuing forward. When AEW first started, I think basically it was Chris Jericho and a group of very talented people that might not have been as well known. Within 3 months that changed, and now within 3 years, we've gotten at least a dozen, maybe 2 dozen of our own homegrown stars that came into their own on AEW television. And Jericho goes on to talk about his career and stuff like that, which I'm not going to get into here because, I mean, that's extensive in and of itself. But two big, I guess, kind of pickups in a way, you know, with contract extensions for Tony Khan. He is not playing around. He is locking down his people when he can. And I will be blunt and kind of transparent with you guys. I probably even mentioned it on the show before. I wasn't so quick to say that Jericho would have resigned. I guess I should say I was more open to the possibility that Jericho not would have defected to WWE or anything like that. Because I don't know. That's a weird thing to me, or a weird mindset. But I don't know, especially with the change in the regime, and maybe that's what it was. Maybe Jericho would have been more likely to go back if Vince was still around, or maybe, I don't know. I'm very curious to, and maybe he has referenced it and mentioned it and I just missed it, which is very possible because he does a shit ton of podcasts himself. But I would be very interested to hear if he would be more likely to go back to WWE now that Triple H is in charge, or if he would have been more likely to go back if Vince was still in charge. But yeah, just to think about someone with Jericho's stature and his status in the industry at this point, in the business, I would love to see what creative freedom Triple H would give someone like Jericho. And I think the length is good too. What, 25, 3 years? I don't know how old that'll make Jericho. What, 55? That's still not crazy old. You know what I mean? And I think even at that point, if Jericho were to leave AEW in 2025, he could probably still have maybe another year and a half, 2 years in WWE if he wants to end his career there. So he can kind of put a cap on his wrestling, like, in-ring career, and then line him up for the Hall of Fame. Maybe have a 3-year deal with WWE. Maybe the third year kind of be a shoe-in for the Hall of Fame. Once you're done there, you're 59 at that point? Who knows if AEW, I'm sure they'll still be around, where they'll be at that point. Maybe you go back and forth. I don't know. God knows what the wrestling world will look like, 9 years from now. So, that's just, again, just my long-term thinking. But I'm not really, I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised. I think if, like I said, if you were to ask me out of all of the guys in AEW, I would say maybe Jericho. I wouldn't have been I'd probably be the least surprised with Jericho going back to WWE. But But yeah, it's a good pickup for them. I think it's good, especially with him being the Ring of Jericho, Ring of Honor champion. That's going to be a big deal and a big anchor for them to get whatever type of deal they're looking for. So I think that's, again, huge for Tony Khan in the aspect of maintaining Chris Jericho, having him, even if he doesn't wrestle as much in AEW, which I think he probably should cut back, make it more of maybe like a Brock Lesnar type in-ring deal with him. Maybe a little bit more wrestling wise. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm happy that he's sticking around. I think it'd be cool to see what he does in the next 3 years. But speaking of Ring of Honor and what that means for their future, Tony Khan has recently referenced the plans and the hopeful plans for Ring of Honor going forward. And we did get confirmation of that on last night's AEW. I'll pull up the specific date for that show, but I believe I want to say it's November 11th. I could be wrong. That could be the Crown Jewel date, but it's sometime like mid-November, I believe. But like I said, I'll get that for you guys in a second. But also recently, speaking to Sports Illustrated, Tony Khan referenced Ring of Honor shows going forward. He said, quote, "We'll have great news about Ring of Honor weekly shows. The success of Death Before Dishonor on pay-per-view has ensured there will be more Ring of Honor pay-per-views. Our goal is to have one more great pay-per-view for Ring of Honor in 2022 and then follow that up with a weekly show in 2023. I'd be very interested to see if that weekly show is on TV. I'm kind of thinking it's going to be maybe like a Fight TV deal or like a Bleacher Report deal where you have to pay like a subscription for like something like that. Or maybe it'll be like on YouTube, like they do with their Dark and Elevation and stuff like that. So I don't know, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's admirable that he's even still trying to continue Ring of Honor. I'm not gonna get into my opinion on whether I think that's a good idea or a bad idea. But I am super happy that he did buy Ring of Honor. I will never hate on that. I love that he owns the footage and the rights to that, because we finally got a bomb-ass video package on Dynamite kind of showcasing some of the prominent Ring of Honor champions. Jericho, I'm pretty certain that was the lead-up for the Jericho match, because that's the whole storyline with Jericho right now, that his goal is to go through and demolish all of the former Ring of Honor champions. And it's sad to think that maybe we won't get a match between Adam Cole and Chris Jericho. Recently, I think maybe it's probably been a week ago or so now, I want to say it was maybe Dave Meltzer had reported that, and I don't know where I heard it from, but someone had said that Dave Meltzer had reported that Adam Cole has been dealing with a really bad concussion since the All Out match, I believe it was, so that's why he's still been off of TV and things like that. So it's sad, concussions are no joke. I know that from experience, so it's shitty, man. It's just one of those things that, and it sucks too because it's not a visible injury, right? It's not like you're walking around with a neck brace or a cast or anything like that, so people know like, oh, okay, like something's wrong. Like it's an internal injury, right? And it's something that, I don't know. It's one of those things that it's a constant struggle and a constant battle, depending on the side effects that you're dealing with. So I just hope everything's good for him, I hope he's hanging in there. I think he's still doing his Twitch, which is cool. So at least he has that outlet and something to keep him kind of occupied. Because we all know how much Adam Cole loves professional wrestling. So, but I mentioned that because he was one of the wrestlers that was shown in the Ring of Honor video package that they did. Surprisingly, Tyler Black was one of them as well, aka Seth Rollins. We saw CM Punk, Samoa Joe, which isn't surprising. Bryan Danielson, of course. So it was really good, a really good video package, and something that I've been clamoring for fucking weeks now. So I'm happy that they finally put that footage to use. So kudos to Tony Khan for making that call and pulling the trigger on that. But to wrap up the Ring of Honor portion, the article kind of goes on to mention that AEW had put on many Ring of Honor special events in 2022. On July 23rd was the Death Before Dishonor pay-per-view, and that drew a little over 36,000 buys, which prior Tony Khan was a really good number. And I'm not sure what Ring of Honor was doing in the past. I'd have to pull those numbers, but that's pretty good for a company that doesn't have weekly TV. I think that just goes to show and to prove the power that AEW has and the reach and the brand that Ring of Honor respectfully built themselves too. So I think there's a lot of factors going into that, and I think there's good potential going forward. But it's just me, kind of personally and selfishly, like I don't know, like I wonder like what would be different if the only thing Tony Khan had to focus on was just AEW, just me being a selfish AEW fan. Not saying things are shitty or anything like that, but everything has room for improvement, right? Like, I think, I mean, I have room for improvement. Like, everything, every living being, everything on this planet has room for improvement, in my opinion. That's the whole point of life, So, it's just one of those things where it makes you wonder, like, damn, like, if he didn't have to focus on Ring of Honor, if he didn't have to focus on, like, the 50 other jobs that he has, and kudos and shout out to him. It's not a knock, again, it's just, you just wonder, right? It just makes you wonder. And on the flip side of that, like, it's just, like, how the fuck does he do it? Like, I'll never know. Like, I would love to be a fly on the wall and just see, like, how he functions and how he, like, just handles and juggles his life in just, like, a 48-hour time period. But, yeah, guys, that wraps up the Ring of Honor portion of everything and the Chris Jericho contract extension side of things as well. But I thought that was something that definitely needs to be celebrated, and with all the bad press that's been coming out about AEW, this is good, right? And this is a good sign for the future. I think especially someone of Jericho's stature in the business, if there was that much bullshit going on backstage to the point where it's boiling over and, like, the inmates are running the asylum, as people, like to say and stuff like that. Like, I really don't think someone like Jericho, and especially Moxley, would want to hang around and deal with bullshit, especially Jon Moxley. Like, if it got to that point, like, do you really think Moxley, of all people, would be showing up to work and sign on for 5 more years at that rate? Like, nah, like, so... While, yeah, there may be growing pains right now, but everything has growing pains, you know what I mean? So I think that's a big sign and telling, too, for the length that they both signed on to. So shout out to Tony Khan for getting that. Moving on to the next outside of the ring topic, we have somewhat of an update from the fallout of All Out and the media scrum that was. It has been reported apparently by Dave Meltzer, and then also... it looks like corroborated on by PW Insider, that Ace Steel, who was part of the backstage altercation involving CM Punk and the Elite, has been fired. Reports shortly after the altercation said that Ace Steel threw a chair and also bit Kenny Omega. That'll never not tickle me. All members of the altercation have been suspended and have not been able to publicly comment or mention the situation at all. AEW themselves have released 0 statements on the situation too. Just ask Ariel Helwani. Now, according to Dave Meltzer from Wrestling Observer Radio, there's finally been some sort of update regarding the all-out altercation. He continued to say, quote, he was officially released yesterday, so that's the first bit of news out of the whole situation in weeks. But yes, he was released, and there's a lot of other stuff going on, but it's just stuff going on. But there's really nothing else to it. He was released yesterday. There's a lot of buts there. I'm one to talk, right? Like, whatever. But Ace, just to kind of wrap it up, they say Ace Steel joined AEW earlier this year as a backstage producer. He also obviously appeared on screen for the company in the build to the All Out pay-per-view, cutting a promo on CM Punk, when he dropped the F-bomb. So just imagine the week that dude had, like, golly. But like I said, PW Insider also confirmed that Ace Steel has been fired, so... I mean, hey, until we get an official confirmation of who started what, like, I don't know, and throwing a chair, like, come on, dude, like, what the fuck, like, and biting Kenny Omega, and that was confirmed by the bite mark that we saw on Kenny Omega, I think it was, like, a week or 2 later, so, on his arm, so, I don't know, like, I don't know, shit happens, you know what I mean? In life, but when you throw chairs, it's like that, who throws a shoe? Like, who throws a chair? Like, come on, like, and again, we have no idea. Shit could have been going crazy. Young Bucks could have been super kicking bitches in there. Like, you never know. So, he could have thrown the chair to defend himself, and tomorrow we could wake up and all the bitches have been fired, you know what I mean? So, it's just, I don't know, like, but I think it's part of me is like, okay, at least we're finally getting some type of news. Like, I don't wish anyone to be fired. And, well, I take that back. And not him specifically, but, you know, different situations. But I say, well, I guess I'll say I don't wish harm on anyone unless they, you know, unless they brought it upon themselves. And if this dude just threw a chair for no reason, then yeah, I mean, what the fuck? Like, you're a producer, like, you're supposed to be setting a good example, like, you're a grown-ass man, like, who throws a shoe? Who throws a chair? But again, until we actually know what happened, he could have been, and I believe, it was reported that his wife was in there as well, I think, and of course, poor Larry, the dog, was in there, but he was heroically saved by superhero Kenny. So, I mean, you know, there's a whole bunch of shit that was going on, and like I said, that could have been his first reaction. They could have stormed in, and again, you know, like, if the three of them busted down the door and stormed in, his first reaction could have been to grab the chair and then throw it, you know? And it could have been he just tossed the chair across the room. We don't know how he threw the chair. So it's one of those things, you know? But I think, like I said, the gist of it, I'm just happy that we're at least getting some type of news, because I'm just ready to get some type of resolution and just be done with it. I get, especially if there's legal shit going on, that they can't talk about it. But it's like, damn, like, can we just be done with it? Can we? And I'm sure, like, if we're feeling like this, imagine how the people involved are feeling, especially the Young Bucks and Kenny, and especially Kenny. Like, he just came back. You just make your return, what was it, 3 weeks prior, 4 weeks prior, not even, and he, all this bullshit happens. So that is the latest update that we have on that. Again, I'm not happy that we got an update, or I'm not happy that anyone gets fired, but, you know, I'm happy we got an update. So, moving on, this is the last thing behind, or outside of the ring, rather, that I just had to touch on, before we get to Dynamite itself. Good old Bret Hart has done a interview recently, and one of the, excerpts from the article is it just fucking tickled me, man. I love Bret Hart. He goes on to say, well, let me back up and kind of set the scene for the article. So, he spoke at a K&S WrestleFest signing. I'm not sure. Probably with just like a fan fest thing, which they're actually pretty cool, and it's really cool to see. It's amazing to me to see, like, some of the draws and some of the talent that some of these, like, local indie shows get, and some of the big names. So shout out to them. Like, I don't know how you guys do it, but we appreciate you guys. But the article says, it kind of talks about Bret Hart's career, and then as we know it, it would end in the tail end of 99 when he was kicked in the head by Goldberg at WCW Starrcade, although we would see Hart wrestle a few matches in early 2000 and a return in WWE in 2010. The kick to the head brought about a concussion issues that would limit what he can do, like we were talking earlier. Part of the disappointment for Hart has always been the dream matches that were left on the table that he wishes the fans could have seen. They again referenced that he was speaking at K&S WrestleFest, where he listed some opponents he would have wanted to share the ring with, while not forgetting to take his signature shot, as what Wrestle purists called it. He goes on to say, quote, Kurt Angle would have been one of my primary guys. He always wanted to work with me, and I wish I could have worked with him. I would have loved to work with Brock Lesnar, just because I always heard he was a good pro in the ring, the opposite of Goldberg. Just fucking great. The opposite of Goldberg. Just fucking, like, look. And then he goes on to talk about, and also a guy he really wished he could have worked with was Rey Mysterio. He says Rey was really special or unique as Andre the Giant was, but in a different way. He goes on to say there's only one great masked wrestler in the history of wrestling that was really great, and that's Rey Mysterio. Rey has always been one of the best. When I think of great wrestlers, I always overlook Rey, but he's one of the greatest of all time. I've always respected him, and I wish I could have worked with him. So that's big fucking praise, you know. I'm no surprise, but it's cool to see Bret kind of give a shout out to Rey Mysterio there. Man, just think about, I mean, obviously, Bret and Kurt have been talked about before, but Bret and Brock, man, like, that could have been a fucking banger. Like, Brock, let's not forget, like, Brock is I believe, 2-time NCAA, like, heavyweight champion, so he's no fucking joke, man. Like, he's a brawler, he's a freak athlete, and he's also a bomb-ass wrestler, so, like, actual wrestler, so that would have been just killer, and I would have loved to have seen that, I mean, as we all would have, but I would have loved to have worked with Brock Lesnar just because I always heard he was a good pro in the ring. The opposite of Goldberg. 2022, man. Still fucking taking digs at Goldberg. I get it, man. Like, I try to not be that person, but part of me, I think, would always be salty too if, specifically what ended your career. And, Brett has mentioned in the past that they discussed it going into it, said, be careful, like, don't hurt me, like, and what fucking happens, he goes in there, gets kicked in the head. So, and Goldberg has apologized numerous times, and Goldberg has even mentioned recently, I think he's tired of fucking talking about it, and I'm sure he is too. Like, if I was Goldberg, I would be fucking, like, that would eat me up inside to know that you ended the career of one of the best of all time, and he's still fucking salty about it, and he's still bringing it up. Like, I would feel some type of way about it too, but on the flip side, man, like, yeah, like, I don't know. It's one of those things that we as fans on the outside can pick sides, but it's just shitty. It's a shitty situation. But I'll forever be here for the digs that Bret Hart throws at Goldberg. And I said something on Twitter. I was like, find you a love that lasts as long as the disdain that Bret Hart has for Goldberg or some shit like that. And it's true, like what we're going on. Was this 23 years now or something like that? So yeah, just fucking great. The opposite of Goldberg. Like, I was reading, I didn't read anything else, and I just saw the one excerpt that I just read to you guys from the article, and I was like, what the fuck is this? When was this from? And it's just from recently. And it's just like no other reference of Goldberg, like no like moments that you wish you could get back or anything like that. Just the exact opposite. Just listed some opponents that you would have loved to share the ring with. Mentioned Kurt Angle, mentioned Brock Lesnar being a good pro in the ring, the opposite of Goldberg. It's just like, oh, it's so fucking great. I'll always be here for it. But moving on now to Dynamite from last night, we will run down the card here and, of course, what happened in the main event. Don't kill me, guys. I actually started with NXT last night. I know. Don't spin pot or negative vibes my way. I don't know. I just something in me just wanted to start with NXT, and the opening match was Rhea Ripley versus Roxanne Perez, and it was just a really good match. Like, Rhea Ripley was a fucking beast, and just it held my attention. So I didn't even know the opening match happened until I pulled up the card to run down it and go over with you guys. I'm not even gonna lie. Like, I think in to be fair, like, I only missed maybe the first 7, 8. Maybe I'll overshoot and say maybe the first 10 minutes, 10, 11 minutes. So the match couldn't have been that long unless I completely have no idea what I'm talking about, which is very possible. I could be mistaken on the time, but regardless, that match could not have lasted long. So yeah, like, I'm not gonna talk about it since I didn't see it, and I didn't see the package or the package between Britt Baker backstage. So again, I don't want to kind of go over something that I didn't see, and apparently it wasn't that newsworthy anyway, but I'm sure it was a fantastic match with the people that were involved. It was Death Triangle facing off against the Best Friends, so, I mean, come on. How can that not be a good match? But Death Triangle did retain the Trios Championship, so Pac is not completely without a title, and Cassidy still has the All-Atlantic. Someone said Mid-Atlantic, and now I'm just like, it's just fucked with my brain since then. But he is still the Atlantic champion. Atlantic. But I did tune in right as Toni Storm was making her way out. Toni Storm is our interim AEW World Champion, Women's World Champion, I should say, facing off against Hikaru Shida. I don't know why I was reading that. I was like, I had like one of those things where it's like, you say it like thousands of times, well, probably not thousands of times, but you've said it dozens of times, and it's like, wait, how do I say that word? But facing off against Shida, the match itself was okay. It was, I'm not gonna say it was okay. It was actually a very good match, but I think there's just so much going on surrounding I don't want to say surrounding the championship, because it's not even like they're focused on the champion, but just a whole bunch of like background noise, I feel like, in the women's division. And it's weird, like, Thunder Rosa's never mentioned. I don't know, like, it's a weird vibe, but I will say I love the physicality that we're getting from all the women involved, especially Saraya, which we'll get into here in a second. But the match itself was pretty good. The ending sequence saw a running hip attack with a Falcon Arrow connecting, but we did not get an ending there. The Katana was hit with an elbow, sunset flip, reverse, but Toni Storm kicked out again. We got a German suplex into a bridge, kick out, back elbows off of the ropes there. Side note, guys, like, just some of the pop-ups again, like, I know I've referenced it before. I should probably go to or just copy and paste and just go to a different screen, because apparently, like, I can't concentrate with some of these pop-ups. But after a couple elbow attacks, Storm hit a huge tornado DDT, turned it into a pile driver clutch, and ended up getting the pinfall victory with her Storm Zero to retain the interim women's championship. After the match, Jamie Hayter and Rebel attacked Toni Storm. After a little bit of a delay, Britt Baker came out, Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, came out and took her time, rather, to get to come down and join the fight. After she made her way finally down to the ring, Saraya came down to even up the odds, and she just came down and fucking tackled Britt and just started wailing on her with actual punches. Well, not actual punches, but started wailing on her and getting really physical. So again, like I mentioned earlier, it's just really cool to see Saraya get physical, and to see especially her running down the ramp and jumping on and doing like a tackle and fucking doing punches and shit with Britt Baker. It's a good thing to see. It obviously is a good sign. That means she's one step closer to, or we are one step closer to officially hearing that she's been cleared. And again, like, especially with what she did last night, like, I don't see them allowing her to do something like that without being cleared. So I think that's just another good sign. So like I said, all the people freaking out or being pissed off or just complaining to complain that they didn't reference it right off the bat. Like, yeah, I mean, of course it would have been, but just give it time. Like, we don't need to know right off the bat. And again, like I'm sure I referenced on here, like, Tony Khan isn't dumb. Like, he's not going to sign someone if he's not going to be able to get 100% out of them. So he knows what he's doing. They know what they're doing. Soraya knows what she's doing. So I think everyone's good in that regard. I should mention also that Britt Baker came down with a Steelers jersey on because they, of course, were in Ohio, so guys know that rivalry, and it was just fucking great. She got booed. Like, Ohio hates the Doctor. It's just fucking great. But after Saraya had tackled her, I believe they went out to the side, into the fans. I think it was the left side, and into the fans, and we just didn't see them since. But they were brawling pretty well together, and I think that it's obviously setting up a match probably for Full Gear between Saraya and Dr. Britt Baker, and I think that's just going to be fucking stellar. I think that's a great first match for Saraya to come back. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. I would actually be kind of surprised if we don't end up getting that match. But after that, we had FTR backstage that was being interviewed by Renee Paquette, which is so great to see her back as well. It's just a fucking great addition, and just finally, about time. But they spoke about their goals and wanting to be AEW two-time champions, tag team champions, specifically, more than anything in the world. Cue Swerve and Keith Lee walking up. Swerve criticized them for having every other company but AEW as their priority. Keith Lee interjected and apologized to FTR, but agreed that they deserved a rematch for the tag team titles as well. FTR agreed that the matter needed to be sorted out and offered a match next week to determine the number one contenders. Keith Lee replied indubitably for some reason, because it's Keith Lee, you know, like it's Keith Lee. He's got to say indubitably. But Swerve appeared to be confused, and he kind of walked or followed Keith Lee out of there. Not noted in the little recap here that I'm reading off of was the apple that Keith Lee had and the snacks that Swerve had. Right before Keith Lee started talking, right when he started talking, Swerve had grabbed the apple from Keith Lee and took a bite out of it. And just all the mannerisms and just the way that Swerve was presenting himself and carrying himself. Like, I just love this version of Swerve. Like, I'm loving it. I would love to see him on TV more. Or at least just get a little bit more, like, just to see his character more. I'm a big character and story person, so I don't know, that's what hooks me probably more than anything else. So I kind of hope we get a little bit more of that. But the match that we're getting next week on Dynamite between FTR and Swerve in Our Glory is going to be fucking great. So I'm definitely here for that. But after that, we had Darby Allin and Jay Lethal being interviewed backstage. They have a rematch coming up, which I don't really know why, but whatever. And they were kind of just going back and forth. Darby told Alex Marvez, who was interviewing them, to leave, so they traded some strikes back and forth. Lethal and Sanjay Dutt dragged Darby over to, I think it was like a garage door. They closed it right onto Darby's stomach area, which sucks. And whenever I see that, like, I'll always think back to when they did it to Chris Jericho. I forget who did it to Jericho. God, was it not the Dudleys? Who was it? Oh, that's gonna bother me. But whoever Jericho was feuding with, it was early 2000s. But they had pulled, it was that pull down door that you have attached to, like, the arenas and shit, like, in the back, where you drag it up to have, like, where that big entrance is for the big 18-wheelers and shit, like deliveries and stuff. And they just rolled it down on Jericho, but Jericho started bleeding from the mouth, like right on his midsection. He started bleeding from the mouth. I mean, I know it's probably fake, but a young Ashley, like, I saw that and I was just like, oh my god, like, that he's bleeding from the mouth. Like, he's like, I just remember being so distraught by that. So whenever I see this spot, like, it just I get an immediate flashback to that. But moving on back to the important thing here. After they pulled that garage door thing down onto Darby's stomach, Lethal applied the figure four, and Sanjay Dutt just continued to just kind of stomp the shit out of Darby. Poor Darby. But back in the arena, Regal was set for an interview with Tony Schiavone before they could really do anything. MJF's music hit, and he made his way down to the ring. Regal had put on his brass knuckles, but MJF said that he was just there to talk. MJF said that he has a story to tell, and whether or not he realized it, Regal owed it to him to listen. And then the masterpiece began, ladies and gentlemen. And just forewarning, the review that I'm gonna do it pales in comparison to the actual presentation. So please, if you see anything from AEW last night, AEW Dynamite last night, watch the promo between MJF and William Regal, and then the promo with MJF and Moxley at the end of the night, which we'll obviously be getting to. But the Regal and MJF one more specifically, it was a masterpiece. It was beautiful, and the second it ended, I wanted to go back and watch it again. Like, I was captivated. I couldn't not look at the screen as they were going back and forth, and as they were just telling us a story and really just setting the scene. And I really feel like we have been on the journey of MJF, especially the past year, maybe a little bit more than a year, or maybe a little less. I'd have to really think about the time frame, but especially the year of 2022, like, hearing, and, whether it's true or not, whether in the real world, in the MJF character world, like, this is his journey, and this is the story that he's telling us. So it's just so well done, and to kind of hear of, if you think about it, we're getting the beginning of MJF, we're getting bits and pieces, different stories throughout his life, different stages throughout his life, and different avenues and different things that he went through to get to where he's at right now. And I think, yeah, the bidding war of 2024, whatever, that's a tagline, right? But I think I really hope that he goes to WWE, not for any reason, just because of the journey that we've heard. And that's why the story that we heard from Regal, which we'll be getting into, and then the story with Punk, like, WWE is and always was the end game for MJF. And I get that feeling, and I know that feeling, because for me, growing up, like, I didn't even realize that anything else besides WWE existed in wrestling, you know what I mean? So I get that feeling, and I think that's probably why I don't even want to say I relate to MJF, because it's not, couldn't be further from the truth, but why I'm captivated by him and why I connect with him. And it's just, I think all of us as fans can really relate to it on different levels, but I think the story and the journey that we're being taken on week by week, last night it just really stood out to me that MJF and his story and the career that we're witnessing is bigger than whether he's a good guy or a bad guy. So whatever happened last night in my brain, like it just kind of clicked with me that the focus shouldn't be on whether MJF is going to be a heel or a face going forward, and I'm sure me specifically will still bring it up and still talk about it, especially going up against Moxley and everything like that. And I think it would be best, but for whatever weird reason, like, I feel like one week we can totally go out there and just shit on MJF and just fucking just hate him and say whatever. We can say fuck you, asshole, like whatever. But then the next week we'll get a night like we got last night, where we pretty much go off the air fucking cheering for MJF, you know what I mean, while Moxley is out there. So in Ohio, again, in another champion or former champion's hometown, when MJF returned in Chicago, who was everyone cheering for at the end of the night? MJF. Last night in Ohio, after he came out at the end of that, granted that who knows what the original plan was, who's everyone cheering for? MJF. He's out there fucking at the top of the stage and on the ramp, fucking egging the crowd on and getting them to get hype, you know what I mean? So it's just, man, like, just something about that guy, like, he gets it, man. Like, something about him, like I said, it's just something next level. He is a generational talent, and I'm just so thankful to be witnessing it, you know what I mean? I think us as fans, we should be witnessing it, and I think we should absolutely be giving him shit when we need to give him shit, though, you know what I mean? So, with all that kind of getting out of the way and being said, we'll get into the masterpiece, as I called it, and kind of pick up there. MJF said that he had a story to tell, and whether or not Regal realized it, he owed it to him to listen. MJF told a story of being pulled aside by his wrestling coaches for some extra work with WWE when he was 19 years old. He spoke about driving to the Barclays Center and how they had tryout matches in front of Arn Anderson, Adam Pearce, William Regal, and Dean Malenko. After his match, Regal pulled him aside and gave him 3 minutes to sell himself to Regal. Regal was impressed and promised to get MJF a job there that day. At that moment, MJF thought he had done it and achieved his dream, but when he told Regal he was just 19 years old, he told MJF that he was just much too young at the time. MJF said his heart stopped. Regal offered him a bit of hope. Regal said that he would put his name on MJF when MJF came of age, and that was as good as getting him a job. He mentioned he did the same thing for Moxley, Claudio, and Danielson as examples. MJF did. MJF went on to tell Regal that Regal asked him to send him a tape every month to demonstrate his progress, and after the third month, Regal crushed his dreams with one single email. The first 2 months, he acknowledged it and said, keep it going, essentially. The third month, not so much. The email spelled out that WWE's policies had changed and they only wanted the best athletes in the world, and when he was one, Regal would know. He went on, he, pronouns pal. MJF went on to say that he thought about quitting wrestling and even thought about killing himself. But now, years later, the shoe was on the other foot, and Regal got fired and slid into MJF's company on the coattails of men who were better than he ever was. He told Regal that his former employer would take several human lives just to get him to put pen on paper, and now he was set to become the world's champion because he's better than you, and you know it. And guys, as MJF is explaining that story, the passion and tears and the emotion that poured from this man, it gave you chills, man. And he read the email word for word. He pulled it out on his phone. He said he reads it every day. And it's just, God, just beautiful, guys. You have to read it. Regal did respond, though. Regal replied saying that he entered carnival at 16 years old and bled from every like spore essentially from his body, fighting grown men just to have a chance at being a professional wrestler. He told MJF that if all it took was an email that he held on to for 7 years to get him into a place where he was at today, and let that kind of fire in his belly, then he had it easy. He also recalled telling MJF to practice talking every day in the mirror and to make a name for himself. Regal defined himself as an old school villain because he drew a line at attacking people like Tony Schiavone. He referenced when MJF pretty much shoved Schiavone down on the top of the stage, and recalled having conversations with Schiavone himself before MJF was even born, and insulted him for taking shortcuts like that, and also hiring people to do his dirty work, and knocking people out with his ring and things like that. Which I liked that he called that out, but he also referenced and acknowledged the power of the punch, you know? Because the second he started saying that, well, I'm thinking, like, well, what the fuck, man? Like, power of the punch is you, like, the brass knucks. But he also did reference that as well. And said, pretty much said that when you're in the ring and you're fighting, it's no holds barred, do what you gotta do to win. But you don't attack people outside of the ring like Tony Schiavone. You kind of have standards, and that's where you don't take shortcuts like that. But I don't know, to me it was kind of, I don't know, if I was MJF, I'd have been like, yo, can you kind of clarify that a little bit for me? But he went on to say that MJF making money and taking shortcuts isn't it essentially isn't what Regal is looking for, and that's not gonna impress him at all. He went and then turned his back on MJF and told him that he still got a lot to learn to impress him. What he did was he turned his back on MJF and kind of held his arms out, allowing MJF to do whatever. So MJF put on the Dynamite Diamond ring and thought about punching Regal, but he didn't. He got really worked up, but he didn't do it. Regal turned back around and left the ring, reiterating that MJF still had a lot to learn. So he never took that shot, which Regal was kind of expecting him not to take, but he was kind of egging him on to do it as well. But yeah, he didn't do it. And MJF stormed out of the ring after that, really kind of pissed off and worked up. And that was the end of that segment. I think that, again, like I said at the beginning, we're on the journey of MJF. And while I so wish that Punk was here, because I think this journey was going to lead to a double turn at Full Gear. I think we were going to get the babyface turn, if you want to call it that, of MJF and him winning the championship, and the turn of Punk. Obviously, I don't think we're going to get a turn from Moxley, but I do think we're going to get a title change at Full Gear, because, spoiler alert, that was announced at the end of the or at the end of the night, which we'll get into in a little bit. But guys, like, I adored that segment. I think it was just so brilliantly done. I think, and it just makes you clamor for MJF more. So, and like I said, with all due respect to Paige and all wishes to him, you know, like, I think MJF, I think AEW did a fantastic job with filling in the last 10 minutes and sending someone out there like an MJF. And thank God that we had an MJF, right? And I think he was the perfect person. So, moving on from that segment, we had a sit-down interview with Renee Paquette and Bryan Danielson and Wheeler Yuta. Bryan was pretty much just expressing his sadness for losing to Chris Jericho and what that meant to him and what the ROH Championship had meant to him, and pretty much just saying how he was pretty much bummed out about it. Renee followed up by asking about what happened with Daniel Garcia, and Bryan went on to say that he sees a lot of him and pretty much just started gushing over Garcia, with Yuta sitting right there and just kind of giving him some facial expressions like pretty much like, what the fuck, dude, like, really? Renee called that out and said, I can't help but notice that you're you know, you have some reactions there, Yuta, what's going on? And Wheeler said that, or he asked Bryan rather, how you could miss the fact that Garcia had been using him this whole time, and said that was the whole plan between Garcia and Jericho, and then he stormed off after that. After that, no pun intended, in the arena we got the official entrance for Dalton Castle, which is an elaborate entrance. He came up, he didn't come up, but the Cody Vader was used for him, which it tickles me whenever that's used now, because I immediately think of Cody. But that was, of course, leading to the Dalton Castle versus Chris Jericho, which is your Ring of Honor championship match. with the boys being ringside for Don Castle and Jericho having Jake Hager ringside, which you guys know how I feel. The match itself was okay. To be honest, like I wasn't really into it for whatever reason. I think it was good, but it just wasn't. I don't know, like there's just something missing, and I'm not digging it for whatever reason, and I don't. Don Castles is fine. I've never really been the biggest fan of his, so maybe that's what it was. I'm happy he got the shine, though. He's been in the business for a shit ton of years at this point. That's probably exaggerating it, but at least, 10, 15? So I'm happy that he finally got his opportunity on TV and got the spotlight, that he has worked hard for. But just something about this match just didn't click with me, and there was a lot going on outside of the ring with the boys and Jake Hager. I think they stole the hat at one point. It was just kind of too much for me, and just maybe I think I just mentally wasn't there with just everything else that we had just kind of witnessed. But more so after the match, Jericho had joined the rest of the Appreciation Society on the ramp. He said that he wasn't done with the legacy of Ring of Honor, that he was destroying champions, ring announcers, and now commentators. Menard and Parker dragged Ian Riccaboni from the announce table and set him up for a belt shot from Jericho. Jerry Lynn had intervened, and Jericho ended up picking him up instead and delivering a pile driver onto the Ring of Honor belt onto Jerry Lynn. After that, we got a video, and then that was it. But after that, we got a video package that hyped up the partnership of Luchasaurus and Christian Cage. FTR and Swerve in Our Glory was confirmed for next week's Dynamite as well, and that Bryan Danielson will face off against Sammy Guevara, and also Riho versus Jamie Hayter. So pretty decent card there. After that, we had Renee Paquette running into Kiera Hogan and Layla Gray backstage. They were terrified that they hadn't found Jade's TBS championship yet. Jade ended up finding them and was furious. She was decked out in some Cincinnati gear, which I don't know if she's from Cincinnati or she just has ties there, but I'm kind of surprised that he didn't find a way to get her on to the Dynamite show. And she had like some really nice bling too, so she was looking good. I don't know what the happening was there, but couldn't find a way to get her like out in front of the crowd, like just do something even for a couple minutes. Like I don't know, like I kind of wish we could have gotten something with Jade on screen there. But after that, we're going back to that rather. Jade was pissed that they hadn't found the championship, and pretty much called out Tony Khan and said that she's going to hold Rampage hostage until she gets her title back. So that's set for a Rampage this Friday night, which is going to be live from Jacksonville, which I'm hoping to be able to attend. Still news to come on that, so we'll see. But after that, we had the setup for the main event. Hangman Page made his entrance first. Moxley started to make his entrance, and then Hangman got a little impatient, entered through the crowd, and met him out there to brawl. They brawled for a few minutes before they actually made their way back to the ring. Hangman had dragged Moxley into the arena onto the concrete floors a few times, delivered a few snap suplexes, climbed into the crowd and went for a dive, or they went to it was actually not a dive. They went to top of a staging area to kind of deliver a moonsault onto Moxley, who was kind of positioned down below. They finally ended up making their way back to the ring, though, and the match officially started. Moxley, of course, was bleeding right from the jump of the official match from the forehead. Hangman was dominating early on with some strikes, targeting the bleeding forehead of Moxley, which, again, no surprise. It just tickles me. I would love to see the percentage of matches that he's had bleeding and then not bleeding. Later on, we had a few back and forths again in the ring, and then Moxley fired back with a cutter. Moxley landed a lariat in the corner, followed up by some right hands. He bit Hangman's head, I think, at one point too, and then did a rake to the back, which I love, a good old back rake. Just never go wrong with a back rake, right? Kind of moving on, they spilled out into the apron a little bit. Moxley attempted a pile driver, but Hangman was able to reverse it into a deadeye. Moxley and Page battled onto the top rope. Hangman pulled him into the ring with a follow-away slam for a close near fall. Both men traded lariats that turned each other inside out. And off of the last lariat that Moxley hit onto Page, this is the one this is the one that did it in. So the they were standing at opposite corners of the ring. Moxley came from one side and just hit just not, I don't know say it. I don't know how you even describe it because it seems just kind of weird describing a move that really hurts someone. And again, no fault to Moxley at all, at least from where I'm sitting. Like, I haven't heard anyone say that at all. And Moxley is absolutely not known to be reckless, so it's not that. I think from what I've kind of heard from just brief, like, just like one or two, like, reputable people who have been in this business for a while, they think that maybe, and just like their podcast, right? Like, they think that it was more so the way he may have landed, he being Page, but it was just brutal. It just, the second I saw it, I was like, oh, he just makes you cringe, right? But of course, Mox hit the lariat onto Hangman and just kind of really turned him inside out. Hangman, the way the lariat connected to, it was kind of like the inside of Mox's arm, kind of connected with more so the side of Hangman's head, and Hangman kind of did like this spinning motion and landed kind of on the mat, like, not directly on his head, but it was just kind of like a weird slant. You just have to see it. It's really hard to kind of explain, and just kind of really awkward to explain too. But immediately the referee went down to check on Hangman, and you could tell something was wrong. He said something. He motioned rather for the doctor that's at ringside to come in and check on Page, because the way he landed was just really badly face first. The match was called after that, and I believe it was just a little over 11 minutes. We still had about 10 minutes left in the show, maybe 8, 9, 10 minutes, something like that. And to be honest, I thought, oh my god, at first I thought, is this like, I hate to say it, but I thought this was like weird, like part of the plan, and MJF was going to cash his chip because we had so much time left over. But it wasn't. Sadly, it was legit, and Hangman really got hurt. And it was just one of those things where it's like, oh my god, like, is this really happening? You could see Moxley kind of pacing around in the ring, circling the ring, holding his championship. William Regal had walked down to ringside and shook Moxley's hand at that point while they were stretching Hangman out. And while they were doing that, they completely took the cameras off of Page. They kind of immediately, once the doctor in the match was stopped, they went to the commentators. The commentators went down the card for next week's Dynamite and I believe Rampage as well. And Excalibur actually got to get some breaths in for his rundown, so it's actually a nice change of pace there. But after that, they went back down to the ring, and Moxley was still in the ring. I think that was maybe about a minute or two had passed at that point. He said he hoped and prayed that Cowboy Hangman Page was going to recover to be 100% so he can come back. He reiterated that this is a dangerous game and you have to be willing to put your body on the line every time you get into the ring. He referenced that Hangman is a husband and a father, so he just hopes the best for him, essentially, which is pretty cool to see. Moxley then called out MJF for what he said earlier and told him to get his suburban ass out to the ring and challenge him right now. MJF walked out with his chip and the referee. Moxley flipped him the double bird. MJF handed his chip to Regal and grabbed a microphone, stormed out of the ring and told Regal and Moxley that he didn't want any excuses or to find him at 50% after a match. He wanted Moxley at 110%. When he was going to be able to beat him clean in the middle of the ring, he declared that he wanted to challenge Moxley at Full Gear. He had contemplated cashing in the chip. He had took his button-down shirt off and kind of paced back and forth, but then that's when he grabbed the mic and said what he said. And that kind of filled in some time there, and like I said, he went back to the top of the ramp in the stage and was pretty much just amping the people up and getting the people going, like, and pumping them up, like raising, like, kind of flailing his arms around, like getting the people going. So, you know, it's an interesting turn. Like I said earlier, you don't really know exactly what version of MJF we're getting, and I think with him specifically, that's part of the fun. So I'm on board for the journey. I am here for it. I'm here for MJF title run. I think they have so much to call back on between just the natural story that you would think between MJF and Moxley, but then the backstory between them back from 2020 when MJF first challenged Moxley. So there's so much they can pull from, so I'm definitely here for the promos that we're going to be getting in the next few weeks coming up to the pay-per-view. I am very happy to see that Hangman is doing okay. It appears that, again, it was just possibly a concussion. He said that he was eating a panini for lunch today, so that's a great sign. And that he just appreciated everyone's well wishes. But yeah, that's obviously a good sign. The scary part, of course, you know, when you see something like that, your mind goes crazy, just a million different directions, like broken neck, like, oh my God, like, can he move? Because and especially seeing it on the stretcher, right? Like, it's probably just protocol, but man, like, it's a scary sight. But I'm happy he's okay. I'm happy he's eating his panini. I hope he maybe had a leftover for dinner or whatever. But again, that is the AEW Dynamite show itself. We have a pretty decent card shaping up for next week. I hope we maybe get another addition two for Rampage, rather. And if I end up going to the show, I'll definitely be giving you guys a live report from that. But thank you guys for hanging out. This has been a long episode, but kind of missed some time too, so you guys can maybe divvy it up a little bit, take it in some spurts, and I'll try to throw a breakdown for you on there as well if you just kind of want to hit some topics here and there. But as always, thank you guys so much for listening and checking out the show. I hope you have a fantastic week, and until next time, take care.